Welcome to a Technique Tuesday stamped card. Today we're going to start the card using a Technique Tuesday background stamp. I like this alphabet stamp because it goes well with everything. So you just peel off the plastic protector and peel it back from the plastic backing. And you mount it on your acrylic block. I have this little Davis stamp pad that I use. It's actually for paper piercing, but it's great for stamping. I'm going to ink the cover of this stamp with Versamark ink. And then I just stamp on the white paper. The pad below the paper allows me to get a nice complete image when I stamp. When I'm adding embossing powder, like this Zing powder here, which I love from American Crafts, it's very vibrant in color, I always sprinkle my embossing powder on top of a folded sheet of scratch paper. I tap off all the excess. There, you can see it. Then I allow the powder to fall into the fold of the paper, and it slides right into the container of embossing powder. To emboss the image, I use a heat gun. I use this tool so often that I just go ahead and keep it on top of my desk. You turn on the heat gun, and in swirling motions, start heating up the embossing powder. You don't want to put the gun too close to the image because then it looks burnt and crisp, so you want to kind of hold it back a little bit. It also warps the paper if you hold it too close. As you start to emboss the image, you'll notice it changes from a dry powder to a glossy look. And that's how it looks finished. Now I'm using Prisma paper, so it actually has a little bit of a texture, which makes the stamped image look a little more distressed. This brown ink pad that I'm using is one that I also keep on my desk. It's by Michaels. I get it in Michaels stores, and I just love it. I use it to ink everything. I've pre-cut all my pieces, so I'm just going to assemble the card. I'll first put it on dark orange cardstock. I'll ink the edges again. Now when I'm using heavier paper, I move from a different adhesive, more of a runner adhesive, to actual glue dots. The glue dots are much stronger. This pattern paper that I'm using is old paper from Chatterbox. I always pick my pattern paper first, and then I use that as my color inspiration for the rest of my project. Again, I'm using glue dots to adhere the pattern paper onto a pre-made card. And here's what it looks like so far. This is a die cut that I've cut using a Quick Cuts die. It actually comes in several different sizes of this same shape. I'm going to turn this over, and I use the really technical technique of just making a mark where I want to cut my paper. And then I cut it with my paper cutter. And again, I'll ink the edges of this piece. And there you have it so far. For the next part of this card, I'm going to use a tan cardstock strip and this Delight stamp, which is an Allie Edwards stamp that's produced by Technique Tuesday. I love the Memento Tuxedo ink because it's a very juicy black ink. Go ahead and stamp on your cardstock strip, and don't worry if the word overlaps and doesn't fully stamp on the top and bottom of your strip. That's just fine. Then I'm going to make this into a faux ribbon, so I'm going to cut into the center of the cardstock strip, and then I'll cut from the corners into that center cut, and that's what creates the ribbon edge. Again, I'll measure where I want this cardstock strip to go, and I will mark it with a pen. I find that by keeping things like my paper cutter, my adhesive, and things on top of my desk, my process is much, much faster. Alright, there you have it. I'd like to embellish the card a little bit, so I'm first going to add this paper flower by Prima. And then I'm going to use a fun technique, and I'm going to layer two different buttons. I have a brown button from Jenny Bolin Designs and an orange button from American Crafts. I keep craft twine, which I've bought at Walmart. It's really cheap. It's usually about $2, and it's a huge roll of twine. I have white and I have natural, and you can just thread it through the holes in the buttons. Make sure the button holes are aligned, both buttons, the top and the bottom. You could use an embroidery needle here at this point if you want, but I find that the thread goes through just fine. At this point, I'm going to tie this one into a bow. Sometimes I use my craft twine just to tie it into a double knot. Sometimes I do a bow, and sometimes I mix it up on my project. So I might have some things with a bow, and I might have some things with a knot. Once I get the edges of the bow the way I want, the loops, the thickness that I want, then I trim off the excess and add it to the flower with a glue dot. I'm going to add photo corners here, but I've already added glue dots, and so the photo corner doesn't quite slide. So one trick I use is I trim off just a little bit of that back edge of the photo corner, which makes it a little less long, and then it slides right on. I'll do this with each of my 4 corners. Okay, there you have it, a Delight card by Technique Tuesday Stamps. Here is the list of my supply list, which you can also find on my blog.